Welcome to Buffalo Gameday Recap. I'm Thad Brown along with AJ Feldman. Preseason game number 1 in the books. The Bills a 23-19 win. But the topic of conversation was more concern than success from Bills fans because at backup quarterback, it ain't looking good. Kyle Allen's first game with the Bills, 122 yards passing, an interception that was ugly that went back for a touchdown. And really, even though he had a $120 throwing, he didn't look very effective today.
No, he never looked comfortable. The offense, the first-team offense, never really got into rhythm. Obviously, they scored the touchdown right away, but that was just a couple of handoffs to James Cook with a short field. It did not look good. You know, this kind of started, obviously, out in training camp, and it got to a point, like, we watched the first week of camp, and they're like, okay, he's not looking that great, but, yeah, it's the first week of camp, whatever.
Right.
And then it kept going, and they're like, okay, Kyle Allen could be a problem. And then today, it reached a breaking point, and now it's an open competition, as Sean McDermott said.
Yeah, Sean McDermott got a specific question about whether this is an open competition. He just said yes. But you go ahead.
And I want to point out there, you might think that's a McDermottism, you know, open competition, whatever. He very well could have gone the other way with, you know, we're not going to overreact to one game. You know, we signed Kyle Allen, we like Kyle Allen, we're confident in him. It was yes.
And he could have said that without saying the competition is not continuing.
No,
yeah,
you know,
right,
he can give toe the line there, but there was not any sort of support for Kyle Allen there.
One word answer to open competition. Yes, it is. But look, you and I both, looked at an important statistic from last year. Case Keenum's preseason debut last year was much worse than Kyle Allen's, at least statistically, today. So whether or not the Bills actually are going to make a move at backup quarterback or are concerned about it, they have stats to say, look, this guy who no one really doubted most of last year as the backup quarterback was worse, so why should we make a difference or do anything different this time around?
Yeah, Case Keenum, 2 interceptions in that game last year, lost a fumble. The offense produced 0 points. Granted, today they got a touchdown from a couple yards.
A cheapy touchdown.
Yeah, a cheapy touchdown, but still, I think that just goes to show that this next preseason game against the Steelers is going to be a big one because one game, yeah, we can write off as an aberration. If Kyle Allen struggles again, now we're starting, the wheels are turning here.
I don't know if if that particular game is important as much as Kyle Allen better start playing better.
Yeah.
To where the Bills feel better about him as the backup quarterback. Now, to be fair, both he and Matt Barkley after the game talked about that it's a new offense and he's got to learn it. And Barkley said, of course, I'm going to look better. Barkley, by the way, 14 of 15. Buck 155 quarterback rating, 2 touchdowns, looked awesome.
Mm-hmm.
But, of course, he's been in the offense 3+ years. Of course he's going to look better. So I think that is a legitimate point. The idea that you need to be on the panic button about the backup quarterback, a silly phrase to say by itself, is probably not necessary through one preseason game.
But your finger's close to the
yes,
panic
that's true.
button. You're like hovering over it. It's that meme where the guy's deciding between two things. That's where we are right now.
All right, let's talk about something a little more positive on offense today. Number 1, Dalton Kincaid didn't get a target, but was in on the blocking situation that helped spring James Cook for a touchdown. 12 personnel, look good so far. Torrence at guard, his first opportunity to play extended in a real game against another team, played the entire first half, and I thought he looked pretty darn good.
And I think you tweeted out, nobody really noticed Torrence out there, which is a pretty darn good thing for a guard, especially a guard playing in his first game, rookie year, first preseason game. The fact that they had him out with the first team to start obviously says a lot going forward.
I like James Cook's game today, too. His first carry was one where he didn't have a lot of room, created space for himself after some penetration. He got the edge on the touchdown. I think he got the edge easily. That was a pretty easy block. But, he showed that if you're a defense that doesn't play runs honestly and doesn't play them fundamentally, he's going to butt you for a touchdown. So I like Cook's game to start as well. I think another guy that we want to talk about here is Khalil Shakir on the negative side. 2 really good catches.
Yes.
I mean, excellent catches, but then drops a bunny that forced the Bills to kick a field goal instead of going for a touchdown.
And we were thinking on the sidelines, I was literally thinking, all right, 2 Khalil Shakir plays. Put that in the back of my head. That's a guy who had a really good game today. And then literally right in front of us, drop would have gone to a first down. And that was Khalil Shakir's game last year. Some nice catches, some impressive plays. We're like, oh, wow, this is why we were really high on him out of Boise State. And then he drops. So he's got to shore that up. That's what Gabe Davis was doing a lot last year. He bounced back with a really strong camp. So there's still plenty of time, but these are just the little things that he's got to get better on.
He cannot sustain momentum this camp. It just seems like every time he has a good play, the bad play comes all too quickly. On defense, the big story, separate of the middle linebacker situation with Terrell Bernard out, wasn't really a competition today, but obviously the number 2 corner spot. And to me, Dane Jackson playing one series and then being done, ball cap on the sideline, while Kyer Elam and Christian Benford played the entire first half, even with what was probably essentially a third-team defense at the end of the half. To me, that screamed volumes about where the Bills probably see that competition right now.
And when you look at the box score, you see Dane Jackson interception. If you didn't see the play, he got the ball thrown right to him, so it was a good spot for him to be in.
He did everything but call for a fair catch in the play.
Exactly,
right.
Yes. But like you said, Christian Benford, Kyer Elam both playing. Elam showing some of those same mistakes that he's seen in the past. Gives up a defensive penalty, pass interference. Carl Jones talked about it on his Twitter feed. He wasn't in a super bad spot, but he just goes that extra mile of physicality where the flag gets thrown.
Christian Benford, to be fair, got a penalty as well.
Yep.
The thing with Elam, and watching today kind of crystallized it to me a little bit, there are too many of his reps that look like he is having a brawl in a phone booth. He's not playing defense. He's just fighting and grabbing and pushing. And obviously that's something that's gotten him into trouble here early in his career and needs to improve. There were good plays today too, but just not enough of them consistently.
And that's a way to play defense in the NFL. There are plenty of cornerbacks who have made a living being really physical, getting a little grabby, but just got to know when to let go. And he's a big guy, so maybe the fact that his arms are so long and it just gets obvious for the refs, maybe.
If only were that simple. But to your point, Tre'Davious White has always been kind of a grabby corner. He's gotten better with it as he's gotten older. As for middle linebacker, Sean McDermott did talk about Terrell Bernard after the game, said that he has a hamstring injury. The only thing Sean would really give up about that situation is that those injuries tend to be longer. So we're looking at a longer period of time. And he kind of danced around a question about how to impact the middle linebacker competition. Certainly it don't help,
no.
But it doesn't seem like this is something that ends that competition. I thought Tyrell Dodson played generally okay. AJ, in terms of down the roster players, were there guys that stood out to you positively or negatively today? You know, guys that need to have a big game to even have a chance at making this team.
I wouldn't start with there. I want to start with Tim Settle, a guy who we thought was firmly maybe not firmly on the roster, but on the good side of the 53. Had a really strong game. Yeah. 2 straight plays back to back, sack in the backfield or tackle for a loss, and then teams up with Boogie Basham, another guy who is on the bubble, trade candidate, whatnot. Those 2 players had a really nice series there.
I agree with those 2 for sure. At receiver, I've liked what Terrell Shavers has been doing a lot in camp. But today had a couple drops, was inconsistent, had the touchdown catch, which, you know, that was one that probably me or you make no problem. He was just way wide open. But give him credit for bouncing back and making those plays. Andy Isabella looked good. You know, we talked about how Khalil Shakir wasn't playing well. If there's someone on this team that could potentially snatch that slot receiver roster spot, Isabella is probably the guy, although it feels like it's very unlikely that Shakir, being a former 5th-round pick, would not be on this 53. But Isabella, I thought, had a pretty good game today.
He looks fast out there. He's really fast. He's shifty. Obviously, that's why he has the physical tools. I believe it was a 2nd-round pick back in the day.
Back in the day.
Yep. So he has.
Being like 4 years ago back in the day.
Back in the day. But he had a good camp. He stacked a lot of days, made some impressive plays, got some moments. So I don't know if he's going to push for that 53-man roster. There's a lot of receivers above him. Obviously, Justin Shorter, the most recent 5th-round pick, has all the physical tools in the world
quite
as
literally
well.
above him.
Yeah, so it's going to be difficult for him to beat out any of those guys, but at the very least, it's good for his future the way he's playing, because he might be a guy that jumps onto another team's roster at the back end of that 53.
Guys talk about creating good tape. He did a lot of that today. Finally, Damar Hamlin, his first game playing full tackle football since January, since the cardiac arrest back in Cincinnati, and had a pretty good game. He was active, 3 tackles, had a stop on a 4th down play. And, you know, we've talked so much about Damar Hamlin, the recovery. Damar Hamlin, the football player, was a guy who was a pretty good tackler, a little bit hit and miss, but generally a good tackler, and okay in coverage. That was generally the weaker part of his game. I think we saw most of the good stuff today. His game was pretty solid. And he talked afterward about how he was feeling all kinds of emotions, but he was not feeling the butterflies for very long because Sean McDermott blitzed him on the first 2 plays. McDermott saying it wasn't intentional, just how the game went.
Maybe.
But I think for game 1 for Damar Hamlin, you really could not have asked for much more.
And if it wasn't the Damar Hamlin story, obviously the cardiac arrest coming back, he would still be a player that we might be talking about here as having a nice, solid game. Obviously, he gets the stop, assists on the stop on the 4th and 1, makes 2 really nice open field tackles. tackles. It was a good quality game for him.
And this is, he's not a guy who's assured to make this team, especially with the camp that Cam Lewis has had. Lewis is probably the fifth safety, and if someone's going to take his roster spot, it would be him. So Hamlin needs to at least show that he can still be the safety we saw a lot last year, and today was a long step towards that.
And you talk about making the most out of your opportunity. Dotson did the same, had a pretty solid game with Bernard out, and obviously Damar Hamlin, Cam Lewis is dealing with that groin injury, so they're both making the most out of their opportunities.
You make the point, it's one thing to potentially lose a spot because you're hurt, but the other guy's got to take the spot with the opportunity he's been given. All right, Bills are 1-0. Sean McDermott, by the way, has won 10 of his last 11 preseason games. Think about that if you want to lay some money on Bills Steelers next week.
Ravens play later tonight.
That's right. Also a team that you like to bet on in the preseason. We're all done for this game. We're going to be back again next week talking about Steelers and Bills. That'll be preseason game number 2 on Saturday, 6:30 p.m. kickoff time. You can watch that game on News 8 in Rochester and News 4 in Buffalo. For AJ Feldman, I'm Thad Brown. Thanks for watching Buffalo Gameday Recap. You will find this show after every Bills game all year long right here on RochesterFirst.com and wherever you get your podcasts. Thanks for watching and listening. We'll see you next week.